hopefully you're seeing the enormous amount of investments that we have been making in R&D under Mahesh's leadership to continue to propel this industry forward. And in the spirit of continuing to propel this industry forward, and in the spirit of learning together, I would love to call on some of our great customers. And when I say your name, please turn on your video. So we have Steve Hay, who is the VP of Consumer Experience at Premier Nutrition. We have Arthur Sylvestre, the VP of Digital Commerce at Danone. We have Dawn Puskas, the lead digital engagement at Church and Dwight. Fabiola Zelaya, the global digital e-commerce. She's leading it there at Suntory Global Spirits. And then Amy Chun, the head of digital commerce in North America for Colgate-Palmolive. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Rachel.
Hi, morning.
Hi.
All right, I'm going to break my screen so everyone can see us. So appreciative for you to join. We have folks joining from both the US and Europe, so I'm very appreciative for all the different time zones. To do a quick warm-up, I'm going to ask you, what's your one-word association so far in calendar year 2025? And Steve, I'm going to call on you.
Wow, I'm going to go with unpredictable.
Okay. Amy?
I'm going to go with resilience.
Arthur?
Well, you know, I just had a baby, so I wish my word would have been sleep, but I'll say it's transformation.
Okay. Fabiola?
Opportunities.
Nice. All right. Dawn?
I will say whirlwind.
Whirlwind. Okay. And now, same thing, rapid fire. We're going to go in reverse order. So what's your one word to describe commerce media in 2025? Dawn, starting with you.
Data resource.
Fabiola?
Partnerships.
Arthur?
I'll stay consistent with my word, so I'll keep transformation.
Okay. Amy?
I'm going to go with choiceful.
Oh, okay. And Steve?
Opportunity.
All right. I like this. All right. There's a lot of optimism in the room. So no need to belabor 2025 because I've obviously spent a lot of time talking about it today. But, you know, the last few months have been pretty wild. I'm sure all of you have had to adjust your plans. And I'm just curious, like, what real-time data have you used to figure out where you should be investing your next dollar or how to think about your retail partners? Like, what does that control center look like for you for 2025?
I can tell you, I think data and our analytics and our insights has been crucial, especially at the Q1 of this year, just given a lot of the uncertainty. I think we've been historically relied, very heavily on our internal data components and resources. And I think we've really made a strong effort to look more externally, leveraging like MikMak's, for instance, in that real-time data usage, which most recently we were just looking at to drive a lot of our linking strategy actions and plans. So I do think it is just given a lot of certainty, we're definitely relying on the data to make some like real-time decisions on kind of how to pivot and how to be choiceful as that word that I used earlier. So.
And Arthur, what were you going to say?
Yeah. No, and you're talking about the last few weeks or the last few months, but actually it's in the last few years. I think that there was a shift. Many companies, including at Danone, I think, in how we try and source more externally and real-time data from social keyword planner, Google Trends, but also what you're going to see in terms of engagement, comments on anything that we do. Then you look at, of course, sales data on a regular basis. And it's very, very important for us to make that shift in terms of where we look for data, but also how we operate internally to convey this information and go from one team to all of the other teams in the organization that can actually leverage those data. And I'll give you an example, but a couple years ago, I think in Canada, one day we're like looking at sales data and coconut milk is sold out everywhere. And nobody knows why, it's like, it's a big mystery because that product it's a good product, but it's not the rising star of the portfolio. And then so we start looking into things like what's happening, was there an issue with production or anything? And the reality is that a couple days later, someone from the social team comes to us and he's like, guys, everybody's making that coconut milk and a cranberry refresher drink on TikTok. And so this is, this is something that happened, and we were looking at that, trying to find rational explanation when the reality was, in the consumer's behavior just happening there, and we were blind to it. So I think there's a muscle that is being built, and it's good news for us, depending on the time of the world and what's happening in terms of events. I think we have to look externally and to communicate internally those types of information.
And is that a big shift culturally? Like, do you feel that your organizations 10 years ago were just completely internally focused and didn't pay attention to the outside world? Fabiola, I saw you nodding your head.
Well, I agree with Amy and Arthur in the way, like, it's also a mindset shift. We always look internally and how we adapt, not only for how we look, on competitors, it's also through our customers and consumers, right? Because we sell to those retailers. So it's a matter of building data and trends within the ecosystem. So I agree with Arthur, the complexity about bringing us together and trying to understand what each of in the different ways is trying to tell us, right? And where are those trends? So I believe what this is great, to have partners such as they're in between those retailers and us and very close to consumers that will help us to connect kind of the dots, because I still believe it's and I love to hear Arthur and Amy, that we're all on the same page. We're not alone on this journey, trying to shift this mindset. And even though the category that we're in, the which I play, but I think that's not it's across all the markets as well. We're in this, we're competing for every choice, for every, option of we need to be there. So that's why we are focusing more on the outside than internally. And that's, probably it's a mindset that is taking us a journey to get there.
Mm-hmm. Now, you guys expressed some optimism with some of your words, and there's some optimism in the month of May. Like, the markets are performing better. Potentially, US and China are going to ease their trade tensions. With this new outlook on the rest of the year, does that cause you to think differently about your planning over the next few months?
I'll chime in on our side. We're in a high growth category with a 10% growth CAGR on average for the last 5 years. So we kind of went into the year bullish. It's convenient nutrition, but it certainly gives us more confidence, and I think maybe a bit of relief given that we're premium brands within that category. But for the most part, it's full speed ahead on the plans that we had going into the year.
Yeah, I would say we're paying really close attention to sentiment in the marketplace too, because things just continue to shift, right? Even when you have some positive stories, you just don't know what's going to happen next with this whirlwind. So we're really just staying nimble, right? And thinking about just our brands from a value standpoint and how we communicate that value, which is really necessary all the time, right? So yeah, I would just say being nimble and flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even though I agree in the way we need to be flexible, we also need to stay focused, right? Because we're building brands and we're trying to keep that momentum in some of them. So if we're not consistent, that obviously has a price to pay. So yes, we need to be resilient. We need to have different type of forecast of what is going on, part of the strategy, but also keep consistency of what we're doing. So we see that in the future, right? That kind of growth.
I would agree. I think if you did a scrape of internal emails and Teams messages, pivot, and did a word cloud, the word pivot would be a large word. Maybe not the one in the center, but it's certainly something that we talk about a lot and execute on a lot.
I love
think the big shift is we used to have one plan and then we would go into execution. Now we have multiple plans ready for us to shift and adjust. And I think that's the big shift. And we have to be okay with that as leaders. You're going to work on something for 3 months and at the last minute, it's not going live, which is fine. We'll get to the next plan and we'll keep building the strategies and plans over time. So this is the big shift, at least for us.
So a question for you, and I'm going to bring in a MikMak company value. So a company value of ours is put the MikMoose on the table. So word cloud, the word pivot. But the reality is so many of your agreements are annual agreements. whether it's with media channels or retailers or even software partners, like you're locked into certain agreements. So how do you stay flexible when maybe so much of your strategy is already locked up?
I think you're totally right. That's exactly what I was thinking as everyone was answering this question, is that you are locked in. I mean, your trade relationships, your trade agreements, all the way down to your agency and supplier agreements are locked in for the year. So I think you have to stay steadfast in your plans. I think 4 weeks of data, although optimistic, is kind of a small set to really make some significant decisions and kind of change your marketplace dynamics. So I do think you have to kind of run the course, keep a pulse on what's happening in the marketplace, and work cross-functionally to understand what is the contingency plan, what is plan B and C, to be able to do the pivots, but in a way that makes logical sense for your business and doesn't create even bigger gaps or messes, that you have to fix at the year end. So I do think it's a paced run, and I think that's just kind of steering the ship in that direction is the best way to go in my opinion.
So something that sometimes can challenge maybe the plans is ever-changing consumer behavior. And I'll just tell you a quick anecdote. Like, one of my favorite things to do at MikMak at the end of the year is pull all the traffic sources for our customers and see if anything has changed. And last year, 2 traffic sources appeared in our top 50 that never had appeared in MikMak history. And it was ChatGPT, and then the second one, DuckDuckGo, which is like the most preferred web browser for Gen Z because it's all about data privacy. I'd never seen that before in MikMak data. You all have really big views to the global stage. What are you seeing in terms of 2025 consumer behavior?
Well, I certainly, from a digital commerce perspective, I would say I certainly believe AI and search, like Rufus, for instance, right, really, really making an impact. Even on me today as a shopper on Amazon, for instance, I am using that functionality. I just do not have the bandwidth to be searching for this toy versus this toy for my kid, right? So it is really about kind of, what new service out there, right? New technology is really gonna make your life easier and add that value. I really think those are the ones that are gonna win out. And just as Chris had said earlier, right, in the keynote, I certainly believe, right, it is kind of that overlay on your lifestyle and the benefits that it'll provide to the consumer's life that are the ones that are gonna win and really make an impact to the businesses and the consumers.
And Amy, from Colgate's perspective, like, how are you thinking about optimizing your presence within Rufus?
Our search team is definitely all over it. We talk about it regularly. We just actually got out of a workshop recently and kind of dissecting it a little bit more about how it's impacting our consumers' lives and how, fundamentally it is very tactical, right? It's like understanding the consumer search terms, the consumer's mindset, their behaviors of when they're shopping. And then also just, down to, again, kind of the mechanical nature of ratings and reviews, right? Like, how are we going to work through our reviews to make sure that they're synthesized in the most appropriate way and the most valuable way to our consumers? So I think there's a lot of tentacles to, what you can do to really fortify your business to make sure you can play along with things like Rufus and other techs. So,
I really loved what you said, Amy, because despite the growing complexity of the environment for us as marketers, to me the only consequence is the absolute necessity for us to focus on the fundamentals that are actually going to help us get the business and the team in the very right place, so that whatever happens can be tackled and successfully activated by the team. And you're going to see, the AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, etc., playing a bigger role, meaning that if you have the right information with the right insights, the right copywriting, the right images, naturally, you're going to resurface as one of the good options promoted by the tools. Then there's going to be probably the paid aspect that's going to come a little bit later. But right now for us, as digital commerce managers or as digital managers, focusing on the fundamentals and getting the basic pieces to work properly is the absolute necessity in my opinion. Because otherwise, you can go in many directions, and sometimes I feel like we're like young kids playing soccer, like the ball goes to the left and everybody goes to the left, and then the ball goes. And we have to, we have to be very clear on what is the objective, what is the strategy, and then how do we get it right, despite that level of complexity.
Arthur, I'm going to steal that metaphor for some internal discussions. I wholeheartedly agree. We really emphasize that we have to be choiceful because you have finite resources, only a certain amount of time, and if you try to test and do everything, it's not going to work. And I think applying those content fundamentals, while there are new channels, new tech, the fundamentals are still fairly similar. You have to have quality content, trusted content. So that's really where we're focusing our investment, just to make sure that we're hitting the fundamentals, but it's definitely going to be a learning journey.
And Steve, given that you're in a fast growing category with probably a very digitally savvy consumer, like any interesting behaviors popping up that you're seeing in your category worth sharing?
I think for us, we have some new consumer segmentation, and what we're seeing, the good news is consumers are prioritizing their health. They want to be stronger physically and mentally, and they're seeking more information, and there's more information out there. The challenge is they don't have a lot of time. So we need to be really smart with our sort of ecosystem, how we become discoverable. And when we are discoverable, also enabling a consumer to take action, because we talk about the funnel, and Rachel, like I agree with your opening remarks on the importance of like a balanced funnel, but the reality is the consumer can experience awareness to purchase in 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So really, we're keeping a close eye on the consumer trends, and they tend to be more promiscuous than they used to be. They can take action quickly. Their expectations are super high on experience. So we're just trying to keep pace.
Mm-hmm. And Dawn, I feel like Church and Dwight every single day acquires a new company. You just acquired a hand sanitizer, but then you sell laundry detergent, you pimple poppers, you name it. Like from your perspective, any standout consumer behaviors in 2025?
Well, I mean, I agree with everyone that sort of the content strategy is critical, right? I think for us, really focusing on where consumers are discovering our brands. And, I think influencer and social continues to tend to be a big piece of that. And, how we're really telling the story there, right, through our partnerships. And then we're just monitoring sort of how that path to purchase is shortening. When we even talked about search, and search is a big behavior in social now as well. So yeah, I think leaning in a bit there in terms of how consumers are discovering new brands.
Got it. So Steve, you were just touching upon this in terms of full funnel. I'm sure you're up against it every single day internally to justify or explain your investment decisions to your fellow colleagues. Internally, like how do you talk about the role of national digital media versus retail media versus owned and operated channels, the role it plays in the customer journey, or even the role it plays in driving sales?
A lot of healthy dialogue, and I would say healthy tension, which is good because it leads to better plans, but we think about it as a both and approach. We know the lower funnel retail media is going to be super effective, super efficient. We love the ROAS that we see. We love the strategic wins that it creates with customers. At the same time, household penetration is probably the biggest goal, to the executive team, and we're not going to drive significant household penetration with a full lower funnel approach. And so we know we need some of that mass awareness building, and that tends to be our mindset, but it's not without a lot of good interrogating of plans.
And Fabiola, you play in a very interesting category. In the US, obviously, there's a lot more regulation because of the 3-tier system, but outside of the US, it looks a lot more like what everyone else is navigating here. So when at Beam Suntory, when you're talking about how you're investing in full funnel and the roles of different media channels, like what's the value of building brand versus driving sales?
So I think it's a matter of also maturity of the brand and the market. They play a different role. Like if we have 100% or a 90% of distribution, you can go for that awareness. And if you're having, so we also play with some prestige brands or the distribution is kind of lower. So we go more on the consideration and the purchase. So it needs to, it will depend on the market and brand. And the way we're operating, we try to, we have our Suntory a global way of media, which is a 60/40 overall, but I know there's a lot of nuances that can play in between, the type of portfolio and the market as well.
And Amy, I got to call on you because I know you got strong opinions, just navigating these conversations internally, educating your stakeholders, like, how do you go about doing that at Colgate?
Yeah, I think Steve and Fabiola are absolutely right? I think it's understanding your brands, understanding your consumers, where are they gapped, right? And then being good marketers, right? And understanding, is that upper or lower funnel and what is that right mix? I think you talked about mix earlier, and I think that's a big question right now, especially just given the current dynamic business-wise. So again, I go back to that word of being choiceful, but I do think it is like really understanding your brands. Where are they in that growth trajectory and that roadmap? Is it upper or lower funnel that's really going to make the biggest difference? And then just putting your bets there and then selling the organization on it. I do think that's a really tough decision, right? Because they're not in the day in and day out that you are. So making the right business cases, using the right data, right, and telling that story is going to be so crucial to getting those wins. So yeah, it's not an easy one, the investment allocation piece, but I think with the right data, you can really dissect, right, what's gonna grow your brands.
So in the spirit of growing your brands, obviously we are at a MikMak event. You are all MikMak customers, which I am so grateful for. I would love to hear, how is MikMak helping you achieve your business objectives? And Arthur, you've had experience, for example, taking us from Canada to now to North America to Danone. So maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, and I mean, you covered it very well as well, I think, in the conversation you had earlier this morning. I think there is a big value in MikMak for a couple of reasons. The first one is, when I hear us talking about, the funnel from awareness to consideration to conversion, I understand what we're saying and I agree with everything that was said. However, the funnel is changing because the consumer is changing, and I think we have a real opportunity as advertisers to put a little bit more of shoppability everywhere, which is what we're trying to do with MikMak. And there is no reason why I could not try and convert when actually there is an awareness piece that is being displayed, because it's such a big missed opportunity. If I'm watching, let's say, a 15-second video and I love the product, I buy the story, but then I cannot buy the product. Like it's a big miss for us as advertisers. And so putting that shoppability here along the consumer journey is very, I think, important for us, as it allows us to capture those low-hanging fruits. Then on a pure transactional standpoint, I think we don't have any D2C model here yet, and so without those D2C models ready and operating in the day-to-day, you have no opportunity to convert the traffic that's coming to your brand website. So that's a second way to use MikMak, and that I think brings a lot of value. The last one for me is on the data piece, and we're just scratching the surface today here at Danone, but a lot of opportunities, I think, to understand consumer behaviors, to be a little bit better at optimizing and predicting based on, again, digital consumer behavior. So it's an interesting suite for us, and I look forward to the next steps and the new tech and tools that you presented as well this morning.
Yes, we can't wait to do that with you. And Dawn, you've been a longtime MikMak customer, and you've even spoken internally at MikMak. So would love to hear how MikMak is helping you at Church & Dwight.
Yeah, I think all of the points already discussed are super relevant, but I would really focus on the data. I mean, making everything shoppable is critical, but what we can learn from that. And I would say not just our access to the data, but our account team, your team at MikMak has really been invaluable to us as a partner in helping to interpret that and also kind of give a more holistic view from what more broadly in the marketplace. So helping us make really good decisions, it is critical. So thank you for that.
Love to hear that the team is supporting you.
Yeah.
Now, we're entering towards the end of this, and we also probably are entering into your 2026 planning cycle. I have to imagine that's what a lot of the titles are in your calendar invites right now. So we're all in the same cycle. Would love to hear where you guys feel thematically are some of the key areas as an industry we're likely all investing in next year to drive growth.
I'll jump in. I think, Amy hit on it earlier. We're really going to be focused on following our consumer first and foremost. So a combination of where's the consumer and what are your brand objectives, and that's going to lead to channels. But I think retail media is almost becoming sort of a core building block of plans, and then it's a matter of where do you layer on or layer within. Social's a constant, increasingly TikTok, both for discovery and shoppability. And then I think brands that have, bigger awareness ambitions are also going to invest in some higher reach. But, certainly retail media and TikTok feel like, going back to that word cloud, are pretty big in the word cloud.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree with Steve in the way, like retail media, obviously from my focus on the role, we want to see retail media in each of the brand plans, as one of the biggest important touch points. And coming back, I think overall it's about data, right? It's following that consumers and where the data is to understand those trends and plan accordingly.
I'll take a little spin. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's going to be that allocation conversation on like the full funnel, right? What's the right allocation by the brand growth plans that we have? But I also think it's like, look, in the midst of a lot of chaos, right? You got to kind of be, steady Eddie as well. So I think it's also like the fundamentals, right? Like RGM, innovation, right? That like really build the brands from the inside out. So, I could see us ensuring that those are fortified and strong, and we have those plans in place to grow the brand from a fundamentals perspective as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love everything that was said. I don't know, what other companies will do, but what I hope for us is really to be able to focus on the key strategic pillars and doubling down on those. And you think about what strategic pillar means. You could slice and dice this in 3 or 4 different things. Innovation, focusing on the big ones that are actually going to drive growth. For us, we're creating a lot of high in protein product to answer some of the rising consumer demand. So we have to focus on this and we have to win in that area. A couple of other, big bets are placed for next year. So I really want us to be fully focused on those. And then in terms of channels or advertising tactics, of course, we talked about retail media, but retail media can mean a lot of things, and there are many, many different types of retail media. So I really want the team to be laser focused on the biggest opportunities, and most of the time it's going to be the biggest players in the market. And last but not least, maybe my little twist to this answer, maybe not this year, but you're going to see a lot of companies reinvesting into some of the fundamentals like we discussed, but also I think SEO in its purest form.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've been heavily relying on SEM and Google Ads, but now that Google is losing a little bit of market share and, you're seeing other things rise, I think that's going to be an interesting move. And if you're well prepared as an organization for that, it can be, I think, interesting.
Mm-hmm. And Dawn, to close it out?
I would agree with SEO and thinking of that, broadly, even from traditional SEO to also, how you show up in the platforms where consumers are spending their time, right? So even in social, right? And, how search is becoming a behavior there. And we know that's discovery tools. So I think, yes, that's a big area. as well as just continuing to explore social commerce as well as that starts to evolve. It's interesting for CPGs because, it is a different space and there are challenges there, but that is sort of a reaction to how consumers are discovering brands and the amplification is happening, right? So those are some changes I see.
So I took notes. So for everyone who's going into planning, what I heard is product innovation, revenue growth management, so the fundamentals, full funnel allocation, where to invest your next dollar, the need for data to make the right business decisions, retail media, TikTok, social commerce, SEO. I got to tell you, some of those words you probably wouldn't have said to me last year. So I like where this is going. So appreciative for all of you for joining us. And thank you for your MikMak partnership and allowing us to pick your brains today. We're now going to turn into our live Brave Commerce recording. So thank you all again.
Thank you.
Bye.